Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Devin Stockwell. It's Friday the 12th of July. Thank you for joining us. Ukraine update, day 870. And apologies, we're joined tonight by Cllr Fatima Joji, SNP Councillor. Good evening, Fatima.
Evening, Devin. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for joining us once again. Ukraine update, day 870. Ukraine has seized a foreign cargo ship near Odessa, arrested its captain alleging the vessel illegally exported Ukrainian grain via the annexed Crimean Peninsula. Ukrainian prosecutors and security service said the Azerbaijani captain was accused of violating rules on entering occupied territory and had allegedly repeatedly docked at the Crimean Sea port of Sevastopol to pick up agricultural products in 2023-24. The head of Ukraine's southern Kherson region said on Thursday that the Russian forces caused fire on a dozen hectare Ukrainian land growing grain. Apologies. The Russians struck a grain storage facility in the region and then attacked firefighters who arrived to extinguish the fire. US intelligence services have foiled a Russian plot to assassinate the German chief executive of German leading arms manufacturer Rheinmetall in a revenge attack over its arming of Ukraine. According to reports, the plot was said to have been in its advanced stages and in the most serious revealed in Moscow's post-invasion shadow war across Europe. Russia is reported to have recruited amateurs to carry out everything from arson attacks on warehouses and shopping centres to smaller actions including acts of vandalism and graffiti, as well as espionage operations. Ukraine's former armed forces chief Valery Zelensky on Thursday began his job as the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Kingdom. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged NATO allies to lift restrictions on its use of long-range weapons against targets in Russia. Zelensky said doing so would be a game changer in its war with Moscow, adding, if we want to prevail to save our country and to defend it, we need to lift all the limitations. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said that Ukraine's right to defend itself includes the right to strike legitimate military targets on Russian territory. Zelensky said Ukraine was very close to our goal of NATO membership, despite the summit in Washington not resulting in a political invitation to join. The next step would be an invitation followed by eventual membership, he said. In their final communique, the 32 NATO members meeting in Washington have all urged China to cease all material and political support to war efforts, adding that Beijing has become a large-scale supporter of Russia's defence industrial base. Beijing's mission to the EU said that the summit was filled with Cold War mentality and belligerent rhetoric. The China-related paragraphs are provocative with obvious lies and smears. France, Germany, Italy and Poland signed a letter of intent to develop ground-launched cruise missiles with a range of 500 kilometres, aiming to fill what they say is a gap in the European arsenals exposed by Russia's war in Ukraine. Norway will donate £1 billion of Norwegian kroner in support to Ukraine for its air defence. The donation comes a day after Norway announced that it would give six F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine to help its defence efforts against against Russian airstrikes. Apologies. Russia must urgently withdraw its military and other unauthorised personnel from Ukraine's nuclear power plant and return to its full control of Ukrainian authorities. The UN General Assembly demanded in a resolution passed on Thursday. President Zelensky has called for a second peace summit this year, in which Russia immediately said it would not attend. So Fatima, So Fatima, this war has just been going on for far too long now. I mean, what's kind of next steps in your opinion?
There's clearly a lot going on here. It's a clear aggressor, which is Russia. And it's Ukraine that we should all be behind and supporting. Sanctions should be fully applied to Russia. Russia clearly have no intention of brokering any peace. As you've just mentioned, they've refused, they will not be attending a peace meeting at all. So what I would ideally support is the full force of sanctions and every country behind, NATO, UN as well, to be supporting Ukraine in their defence, because that is what they have left. Just they need to defend themselves against what is a clear aggressor with no intention of brokering any peace at all.
I mean, at the start of the war, we've seen Boris Johnson kind of hand out a lot of sanctions. They equally seemed to have not really worked an awful lot. Would you tend to agree? Would you tend to agree with that?
Because he hasn't really gone far enough, I think. He's just been very light with the sanctions, and a lot of that is influenced by Britain's political and economic needs. I feel he's been very light on Russia. So I do feel, as I said before, that they should face the force of full sanctions, not just from the UK, but every country possible should be behind Ukraine, because we're talking about Russia, and to be honest, everyone can see that they have no intention of brokering any peace with Ukraine at all.
Should Keir Starmer, I know he's been in since taking over from becoming the new prime minister. Should he be kind of giving out? Should he be giving Ukraine basically what they need to win this war?
Absolutely, and I'll be interested to see how Keir Starmer approaches this, and also he's got his cabinet members in place as well. So how the foreign office policy will shape up to the support that we will be offering Ukraine as well, because the Labour government, for transparency, I don't support the Labour government. I have very little faith in the Labour government, so I do hope that they prove me wrong and actually stand up to aggressors like Russia, change foreign policy for the better, UK foreign policy, and the UK foreign policy should involve deploying every manner of support that we can to Ukraine, a country that's directly under threat. Scotland, we're very clear in our stance fully behind Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. We obviously don't have control over the foreign policy. The UK government does that. That's down in Westminster, so we have very little say and input on what happens there. But all we can do in the meantime is just do everything we can to support the Ukrainian nationals that have claimed asylum here, and we have quite a few just next door to me as well. We have not physically next door, but next door in terms of geographically, like constituencies and cities. We have Ukrainian nationals in Scotland, and a lot of them would very much like to go back to Ukraine. I was also quite a few of them are feeling very at home there, but as one of them said to me, home is where their heart is. They really very much would like to be able to return, quite a lot of them. So therefore, Ukraine should be supported in defending itself, because we cannot see a situation where Russia wins here.
Thank you, Fatima. Back on the latest from Israel and Gaza, at least 38,345 people have been killed and 88,295 wounded in Gaza since October 7th. Israeli strikes killed another 32 people in the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Health Minister in Gaza said today Hamas reported more than 70 airstrikes, including part of the territory, including the location in Gaza City and the north. A refugee camp in the centre, along with Khan Yunis and Rafah in the south. President Biden acknowledged that the difficult complex issues remain between Israel and Hamas, but the progress was being made in reaching a ceasefire deal. Benjamin Netanyahu office confirmed that its negotiation team, led by Mossad intelligence chief David Barnea, has returned to Israel after talks with mediators in Doha on Thursday. Excuse me. Netanyahu said Israel needed control over the Palestinian side of Gaza's border with Egypt to stop weapons reaching Hamas. Hamas says that Israel must withdraw from all Gaza territory after a ceasefire. who are reporting that Israel and Egyptian ceasefire negotiations were in talks about an electronic surveillance system along the borders between Gaza and Egypt that could allow Israel to pull back its troops from the area if a ceasefire is agreed. A senior Hamas official has blamed Israel for a failure to build on momentum created when the group dropped a key demand in the US drafted ceasefire offer a week ago to clear the way for the deal. The Hamas official has said Israel was stalling and wasting time. Hamas is suggesting during a ceasefire negotiation an independent government of non-partisan figure run post-war Gaza and the Israeli-occupied West Bank. President Biden said he is disappointed with the problem-plagued effort to deliver aid to Gaza with temporary appeal, which US officials say will soon permanently end. In central Gaza, Israeli troops said they killed an unspecified number of militants. About 600 bodies were found under the rubble of Gaza City eastern. About 60 bodies were found under the rubble of Gaza's city eastern Shaju neighborhood. In eastern neighborhood, Gaza's civil defense agency said civil defense spokesman Mahmoud Bassal said 85% of buildings are now uninhabitable and has been left a disaster zone. Dozens of residents returned to Gaza City today to check the damage after several emergency teams put out fires in the early hours. Staff at Al-Wada Hospital in northern Gaza say there has been a rise in injured patients from the Gaza City in recent days. Since the Israeli military ramped up its attack on the area in Han Yunis, southern Gaza, Hamas media said 4 people working for the Cllr Foundation, a Muslim NGO based in the UK and Turkey, were killed in an airstrike. About 6,400 Palestinians reported as missing to the International Committee of the Red Cross since the outbreak of the war in Gaza on October 7th are still yet to be found. Many are believed to be trapped under debris, buried without identification or held in Israeli detention, while others have been separated from their loved ones who have been unable to contact them. The World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom has said that only 5 trucks carrying medical supplies were allowed into Gaza last week, and more than 34 trucks are waiting at the Al-Ari crossing, and 850 pallets of medical supplies are awaiting collection. A further 40 trucks are waiting in the Ismailia in Egypt. The UK has stepped up effort to target violent Israeli settlers, adding new individuals and organisations to a growing sanction list and warning banks to check transactions linked to all Israeli outposts in the occupied West Bank. So Fatima, a bit like the Ukraine and Russia conflict, this is just another kind of war. It's just ongoing and seems to be no close to come to an end. What are your thoughts about what's happened so far?
Well, no, you're right there. It's like it's not coming to an end, and unless there is an immediate ceasefire, we will witness the complete destruction of Gaza in real time. And I would have to say that it's been clear to everyone that the SNP are the only party which has consistently called for this ceasefire since 7th of October. And a 2-state solution as well has always been our stance. In addition, we want to end arms sales to Israel. And what I would like to see here going forward, the first step after an immediate ceasefire is that we should be very clear that there must be the recognition of the state of Palestine. And in terms of action that's coming from Scotland, we saw a motion in the Scottish Parliament. MSPs did back a motion that was put forward by Hamza Youssef in the Scottish Parliament by 90 votes to 28, which called for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Gaza conflict. In Westminster, since 7th of October, we've had the SNP being the main opposition and holding the UK government, the previous UK government, to account. This Labour government, it seems already, are facing calls to support an immediate ceasefire, end arms sales to Israel, and also to support a two-state solution. But it's not looking promising at all. I think Keir Starmer has made it very clear where he stands. He seems very reluctant to call for this action. The Labour Party did vote down SNP amendments that called for an immediate ceasefire. They have consistently watered down SNP proposals that have been very clear in this ceasefire. So I have very little faith in what Keir Starmer's Labour government will do. But as I said from the beginning, if we do not see an immediate ceasefire, we are going to see the complete destruction of Gaza.
You mentioned sanctions before when we were discussing Ukraine. Is that something you'd like to see further down the line for perhaps the UK sanctioning Israel? Is that something you think is a possibility?
Well, yes, ending arms sales is a massive step towards that. Ending arms sales. You know, it's very clear that Israel has also been breaking international law. That's been recognised at international level through our international courts as well. And what surprises me is that Keir Starmer is someone with a legal background, and he seems to be ignoring these clear violations and these clear reports that are by the ICJ as well, that's clearly stating that Israel is committing war crimes. There is a call out for Netanyahu and also Hamas to face criminal proceedings in terms of the killings and the murder of innocent civilians as well. And this all should be supported. They should be brought forward, tried, and clearly the violations should be addressed to. They should be sanctioned as well.
Thank you, Fatima. Reports find the UK general election had the lowest turnout since universal suffrage. Just over half the adults in the United Kingdom voted in last week's general election, making it the lowest turnout by shares of population since the universal suffrage, a report has shown. The Institute for Public Policy Research think tank found out that just 52% of adults cast their vote on July the 4th. Turnout has been reported as being the lowest since 2001, measured by votes counted as a proportion of adults who have registered to vote. Harth Patel, a senior research fellow at the IPPR and co-author of the report, said that the fact that only 1 in 2 adults voted this year was shocking. It has been suggested that more than 400,000 people may have been prevented from voting in the general election as they lacked any form of self-identification. A survey by pollsters Morton Common reveals 3.2% said they were turned away at least once last Thursday, which, if reflected across the United Kingdom, would equate to more than 850,000 people. Labour is expected to announce an election bill in next week's King's Speech after promising a reform. It is expected to lower the voting age from 16 to 18. And introduce automatic voter registration to make it easier for people to turn up at the polling station and cast their ballot. Fatima, so Labour looking to bring the voting age down to 16. Is that something you can, excuse me, is that something you can get on board with?
Can see my volume was missing. No, absolutely. Is my response to your question, and I would encourage them to follow suit, like what we're doing up in Scotland as well. You know, people can vote as young as 16, and that should be the case. I think I've met many 16-year-olds, worked alongside many 16-year-olds, and they clearly are clued up on what's happening. They clearly do deserve a voice, and that voice, the strongest voice they could have, is going to the ballot and voting for who they want to represent them. They should be able to make that choice. And I would like to see more from Labour. I would like to see them go even further. I think the Scottish Parliament, our own electoral reforms is a model they can follow. I feel that the voting rights should be extended to EU citizens as well. They should be able to stand and vote in the general election. That's not happening just now. So EU nationals, that's not happening. EU nationals in the UK cannot vote in the general elections, but they can in Scottish Parliament. So I would like to see all these reforms happening. And, you know, you mentioned this low voter turnout. I do feel there's an amalgamation of factors that led to this, and that would include the previous government's serious issues with their own proposals. I feel that they have disenfranchised many voters by introducing voter ID. I also believe that the whole postal vote snafu could have affected many people being able to vote. They also called in a general election over the holidays as well, which impacted many people. So I think we need, but and I feel that Scotland would have been well hit by this because of our own holidays. So it was during our holidays. So I would really like to see further consideration going forward and better reforms to ensure that we can maximise people's opportunities to exercise their democratic right, which is a far cry from what the previous UK government under Rishi Sunak did, under Boris Johnson as well. In fact, under every Conservative leader, well, the revolving door of leaders that they've had, that I've even lost count, Liz Truss as well, I think all their proposals have been appalling. So let's just see what Labour government have. But what they're proposing now, in summary, I don't feel it goes far enough. And I feel that the Scottish Parliament and our own reforms, our own voting rights, who can vote as well, is a good model for the Labour government to adopt UK-wide.
I mean, 52% is a pretty damning piece of data. Is there a case to be made that that adults, or not just adults, that people in general don't really know what they're voting for? They're not they're not getting informed enough. Is there a case to be made for that?
I do feel that, as I said in the beginning, I do feel that I am seeing evidence that a lot of people were impacted this election, particularly due to a number of factors, and that includes voter ID, that includes in Scotland up here, the fact that they called it during the holidays and the whole postal vote snafu as well. But maybe we can also look at discussions around voter fatigue, people feeling disenfranchised. Yes, and maybe political parties are not offering people a choice. I mean, what sort of change is Labour offering when they're basically Tory light? They're Tory 2.0. So that's not really an option. And, this election, a lot of people are just focused on getting the Tories out. So they gravitated towards Labour to do that. I don't feel people voted Labour because they wanted to vote Labour. They just voted Labour as the least worst option. So, and if they felt they couldn't do that, it was a situation where they just felt fatigued. They just felt switched off completely and didn't know who was going to make a difference to their lives, because they're not seeing that. They're just seeing their lives getting harder UK wide, and that's coming from Westminster. So they went for the Labour Party. I don't think it's because Labour had anything to offer. I don't feel Labour won this election because they were the change everyone wanted.
Four people drown trying to cross the English Channel. French officials have said that 4 people died overnight trying to cross the Channel to reach Britain. A rescue operation took place just off France's northern coast after reports of people in the sea. 4 of those pulled from sea had drowned. At least 56 survivors rescued early on Friday morning are now being cared for by French authorities. The boat was launched off the coast of France at about 2 a.m. French time. The drownings happened after one of the tubes from the dinghy the group were travelling in deflated. 3 people who were found unconscious in the water and a 4th found clinging to the wreckage of the dinghy could not be resuscitated. These deaths are the first to happen since Keir Starmer took office as UK Prime Minister. He has pledged to stop the criminal gangs responsible for organising channel crossings, but is unlikely at this point that any new policy can be put into action quickly enough to make a dent in crossings through the summer months. Home Office figures show 419 people made the journey across the Channel from France in the 6 boats on Tuesday. This takes the provisional total for 2024 to just over 14,000. I mean, Fatima, these are really quite astonishing numbers, and it's more lives lost for trying to cross the Channel to come to Great Britain. What can be done to solve this?
No, it's really, the frustrating thing about this, and the really sad thing, is that I do believe this is preventable. 4 words: safe and legal routes. We have been shouting for this for so long up in Scotland. Safe and legal routes would massively help address this. You know, the previous UK government failed to respect its obligations under international law by introducing safe and legal routes for asylum seekers. And therefore, I would like to see the Labour government change this hostile environment, change this attitude, and introduce safe and legal routes so that we can address, which would massively help to address the business model of criminal gangs who profit from exploiting these vulnerable people. Safe and legal routes will damage these businesses, rightfully so. They've made one step in the right direction so far, which is scrapping the Rwanda bill. That's a start, but absolutely, I would like to see more to address these journeys. These are preventable, and it's really sobering and really sad to see people dying. You know, I saw a really sobering quote that said, when taking this risk to that you know you would drown, when going on water, you would rather take that because water is safer than the land that you're on. So these are the dire circumstances that many people are in. And I always refer to Scottish Government because we do things massive. We have a different attitude to this hostile environment, and I'm yet to see a massive departure from that from the Labour government. Rwanda Bill is just a start, but the Scottish Government did publish a paper about last year with our own proposals on migration, which would end hostile environment and ensure that we have a humane, fair and compassionate refugee and asylum policies. And that starts with safe and legal routes, better processing times as well, giving asylum seekers the right to work as well. And if they won't do this, if Keir Starmer's Labour government will not do this, if they will not overhaul the whole hostile immigration policies and attitudes, if they won't do this, they should devolve the necessary immigration powers to Scotland to allow us to do this, to allow us to build an immigration system with fairness and compassion at its core, at its centre. And, you know, that's just a temporary measure until we achieve independence, because to me, that's the ultimate goal. Independence will give us all the powers we need to shape the Scotland we want in terms of migration and immigration and to end this hostile environment. But safe and legal routes, I want to hear Keir Starmer act on that immediately. We can prevent more deaths.
Dozens of long-finned pilot whales have died after a 77-strong pod came ashore on an Orkney beach in what could be the biggest mass stranding in decades. 12 of the animals at Tresness Beach on the island of Sandy were still alive, but according to rescuers from the British Divers Marine Life Rescue, it was thought they could not be saved. It was unknown what triggered the stranding, but experts said it was possible that one of the whales got into trouble and the others followed. Experts from the BDMLR, the Scottish SPCA and marine vets from the Scottish mainland went to the scene and said in a statement, the regional team was immediately mobilised with response equipment to make their way over to the island, whilst we waited for more information on the situation. From the small number of medics already on Sandy that were on their way to the scene. On arrival, the medics found there to be about 77 animals high up the beach, having evidently been stranded for several hours already. Sadly, only 12 of them are still alive at this point. Rescuers faced difficulty in righting the whales in an attempt to refloat them due to soft sand on Thursday. It could be the largest stranding event in Scotland since 1995, when the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme was founded. Fatima, this is another quite awful story. What's your reaction?
I did see pictures online, and it was really sad to look at. I couldn't really, to be honest. It's I think the only thing I can say is just that it's really upsetting to see that, and I would have to say that the response so far, efforts to address this, have been commendable in what is a terrible situation, distressing for many to look at as well. So I just hope to see that. I'm just looking to see what happens next in terms of what we can do. address this, because it is a really sad story. It is really awful to look at as well, the pictures that are circulating online.
Research finds lower air pollution may help preserve older people's independence. Reducing air pollution may help elderly people to live independent lives for longer, research has found. The change from being independent to needing care was linked with local air pollution levels during the previous 10 years, especially in those over 75 years old. This relationship was strongest for particle pollution from transport and provided nitrogen dioxide. Dr. Boya Zhang of the University of Michigan, who is one of the authors of the study, said, "Air pollution is linked to worse health, more lung disease, more heart disease, shorter life expectancies, and more likelihood of dementia." The researchers estimated that 730,000 people a year in America lose their ability to live independently due to traffic pollution. This was approximately 15% of total numbers of people who lost their independence. Apologies. Dr. Sarah Adair, who led the study, said, "Our results provide the evidence that damage done to our bodies of air pollution may alter how well we are able to take care of ourselves as older adults. Taking action on air pollution will not only enhance the quality of life for older adults, but also to reduce healthcare burdens on society." I mean, Fatima, I'll bring you back in. We want our kind of our older generation, no matter where they're from, to still be able to kind of live independent lives. This looks like this. What's your kind of take on this story?
Well, I think evidence-based research, like what you've just quoted here, is my first time hearing it, is a massive step towards explaining the sort of action we should be taking and the consequences of inaction. And it's all down to emissions that are contributing to air pollution massively, and climate mitigation efforts that are happening across Scotland will massively support this. If we look at what's happening just now across Scotland, and this is being implemented across different local authorities, even up here in Aberdeen City, we're seeing the introduction of low emission zones, and this would really help address air pollution. Low emission zones already are receiving positive feedback in terms of supporting us in terms of reaching our climate targets. We don't recognise, I feel we don't do enough to explain or show, or the evidence-based research on the impact of emissions and climate change on our health and ability. And it's not just older people, even though older people, I think this research suggests, it'll disproportionately affect older people due to older people being more vulnerable in terms of health impacts and health risks. But what this research actually explains is that it could really significantly cause massive limitations, disabilities in terms of older people who would otherwise be able to lead independent lives if these emissions weren't happening at such a scale. So I hope research like this is repeated and shared widely so that we could take in the introduction of LEDs and even push for them, low emission zones, the introduction of these zones, more seriously and welcome them, because we want our elderly to be able to lead healthy, independent lives and not have to suffer over a situation that is entirely preventable by reducing our emissions.
I mean, the LED zone has been somewhat of a controversial talking point, especially people who are driving throughout the city centre of Glasgow. So that's something you definitely welcome.
I do, and to be honest, a lot of cars today do meet the requirements. So it's not a significant number of people who are impacted If we look at that, a lot of people do meet the requirements for LEZs. So it's I welcome it. In the long term, we need to be able to ensure that we're meeting our climate targets, and it's not just about hitting targets, to be honest, it's about actually surviving. We need the planet to live on. And if we can prevent people from being disabled by these emissions, which are avoidable, then we absolutely should take any measure that we can. And the implementation of these low emission zones do take into consideration the impact on many people being able to also go about their economics jobs, about their jobs and about their businesses. So I think maybe I think that a lot of the controversy is coming from the fear of, or the direct impact of what people might think is having a negative impact on being able to run their businesses. And therefore, I think the solution to that is consulting more with people impacted throughout the cities and to be able to support them in transitioning to these new policies. Sorry about the phone ringing there. It threw me off as well.
That's quite all right. X, formerly known as Twitter, has been warned by the EU it potentially faces large fines after regulators said the blue tick system for users is deceptive and is a breach of landmark social media rules. The European Commission said the platform did not comply with the Digital Services Act. X faces fines up to 6% of its global turnover if the preliminary findings are confirmed. X introduced paid for blue ticks as part of its revamp of its premium subscription service, costing €8 per month. Brussels has said this has been abused by bad actors. The EU's executive arm said X has breached the Act in 3 areas: deceiving users by giving blue ticks previously a way to signal account reliability, to untrustworthy accounts failing to give researchers access to publicly available data such as posts, and running an inadequate advertising service, which prevents researchers from scrutinising ads, including deliberately misleading ones on the platform. There is evidence of more motivated, malicious actors abusing the verified accounts to deceive users, said the Commission. Fatima, Elon Musk be in a bit of bother here. I don't know about you, but I really refuse to pay for a Twitter paid subscription. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when Elon Musk first introduced subscription access to Twitter, you could see that already I'm still calling it Twitter, X as it's now called, formerly Twitter, you could see a lot of views. I was seeing a lot of activity on my timeline about people rushing to Threads as well. It's no, to be honest, it's no surprise to me that Elon Musk has found himself in this situation. I do feel that the way he's been running X has been quite the tumultuous journey, to be honest. A lot of people have discussed how their user experience has been impacted negatively, although Elon Musk will do everything he can, as I see on his own Twitter account, to show that people are enjoying the use of... I'm just going to give up and stop trying to say X when Twitter's still stuck in my mind, but everyone knows what I mean. So if these reports are confirmed, then absolutely he should be fined. He should fix these deceptions, and he should also comply with the Act. As simple as that.
Growing calls for a defiant Biden to withdraw from the presidential race. President Biden has faced more calls to step aside as the Democratic nominee in the race for the White House. Last night, Biden introduced President Zelensky as President Putin at the NATO summit press conference in Washington. Later, while taking questions from reporters, Biden mistakenly called Kamala Harris Vice President Trump in response to one he said he was the most qualified person to run for president. Biden spoke for 58 minutes, including 50 minutes of unscripted question and answer. He appeared most comfortable as he discussed thorny foreign policy questions. He was also asked whether he would step down if staff showed him data that indicated Harris would be more likely to beat Trump in the election. He said he would not step down unless staff showed him data there was no way he could win. Biden is confident he will once again defeat Trump. He said, "I beat Donald Trump once and I'll do it again." He also called the debate 2 weeks ago a mistake and said his schedule ever since has been full bore, and that his wife Jill Biden had been critical of this. Fatima, I'll bring you back in once again. So, Joe Biden last night, I mean, two pretty monumental errors at the NATO summit. Should he ultimately just step down and let someone else carry the can?
I did see the clips circulate online of him calling President Zelensky Putin, and also calling his Vice President Kamala Harris Trump. And I do feel this is concerning. It is largely concerning, to be honest, for such mistakes to be made. I mean, Kamala Harris is his literally right-hand person, and he's making mistakes like that. So I think it's more of concern. And I think before I go on, I think we should be able to express our concerns about Biden without abusing or insulting him, because I could see a lot of that is going on. And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on with his health. I don't know what's happening there. But all I can say is he's standing to be the leader of a really powerful country, leader of the free world. And it's not compulsory for him to run a second term. I feel that it's time for him to step aside, to answer your question, and let someone else take over the reins, regardless of whether he feels he can win or not, because it's not just about the winning, it is about being able to govern as well. Yeah, and sorry, go on.
Apologies. So hypothetically, if he stepped down and say Kamala Harris took over as the Democratic nominee, has she got a better chance of defeating Donald Trump?
I don't know, to be honest. I would hope so. I would hope, I think a lot of people would want to vote Kamala tactically so that Trump doesn't win again. At the same time, we're seeing many people voting Trump because they're tired of the establishment. I obviously don't support Trump. And in all honesty, if I was an American citizen, I would be looking at Biden and Trump and would not have any idea who I want to vote for, to be honest. I'd probably go for Biden just because I don't want Trump in, but President Biden is not really offering me the change. But I do feel that whatever is going on in terms of his health issues, he is a better option than Trump just now. But I just worried about the future in terms of governing if he does win. And that's where the discussion needs to be had. They need to be able to look at the whole governing aspect. And I think that should decide that he should possibly step back and let someone else take over.
Is there some similarities to, the general election we had last week, that some voters are kind of voting tactically, as you say, because they want, the lesser of two evils, maybe, if you will?
Tactical voting happens in the UK because of the silly first past the post system, I feel. That's why a lot of people are forced to that's why a lot of people are forced to engage in tactical voting. And also, I would say the same for America. So I feel the system has massively impacts that. And if we weren't following these systems, I think people would feel more empowered and emboldened to vote for who they want. So people are forced into this situation where they are considering, well, I don't want this person in, so I have to vote for this person. I don't think anyone should be in that sort of situation when they're trying to exercise the democratic right to choose who they want to represent them. So I feel an overhaul of the system, first of all, would see us not having to face this sort of situation. And overall, I think political parties have to look at who they put up to lead specifically. People deserve options.
Polish MPs vote down bill to decriminalise facilitating abortions. Polish MPs, members of the Polish Parliament rejected a bill today that would decriminalise the act of facilitating abortions. The draft law was rejected by 218 MPs against 215 in favour. The bill was the first of 4 drafts to liberalise abortion access in Poland, put forward by the members of the ruling coalition. Fatima, 218 MPs against this, 250 in favour, about 3 votes in it really. Where do you kind of stand on this?
I've been very clear and very vocal on where I stand on decriminalising abortions. This is a women's rights, human rights, health rights situation, I feel. And women everywhere should have the right to access the very best level of health support. And that extends to abortions. I feel that women should be able to access them safely and free from stigma. Thankfully, I am a member of the party that shares this view. The SNP has been very clear that women should be able to access abortions without judgment. And it's unacceptable for such obstacles to be put in place, because it does create, to me, in my opinion, violations of human rights and access to good, safe and clean healthcare. And we've recently seen in the Scottish Parliament, Gillian Mackay's unanimous, or almost unanimous, bar the one vote for her members' bill for safe access zones. It passed overwhelmingly. And right now, even in Scotland, we're looking at reforms to ensure that abortion services are first and foremost a healthcare matter. It should be located within that discourse. So I think that really sets out where I stand on this. And there should be a range of measures to ensure all women have access to timely abortion care should they require it. And women should also have their choices should be increased for where they access this essential care. And I think any attempts to do otherwise is just a violation of human rights.
So what would be
and healthcare rights?
What would be the next step to get this law passed?
It would certainly, I think if I look at how it has played out in Scotland, it would certainly require a massive movement, civilian movement, to be honest. It would require, So I do feel that a lot of it has to do with the political landscape as well, and how each government, where they stand politically as well, does impact that significantly. But in Scotland, even within the SNP, we make it a matter of conscience as well. But then each political party sets its own platform. So I think, first of all, we have to be very cautious about the sort of governments we vote in to be able to support legislation through that decriminalises abortion. And I think a lot of backing from civilian movements as well, from groups and research, education, and locating this discourse within human rights and healthcare rights is a massive step.
The Scottish Social Service Council appoint new chief executive. The Scottish Social Service Council today announced the appointment of Marie Allison as its new chief executive officer. Marie was appointed interim chief executive officer in the spring following the retirement of Lorraine Gray. Marie has a long association with the SSSC, most recently as the Director of Regulations. The SSSC convener Sandra Campbell said, I am delighted that Marie is our new Chief Executive Officer Marie brings extensive knowledge and experience of the SSSC and social service to the role, as well as boundless energy and genuine passion for the work of this organisation. The Council is really looking forward to working together with Marie. Marie Allison commented, "I am very proud of the Scottish Social Service Council and all that we have achieved so far. I am pleased to be the new Chief Executive and very much looking forward to working with Convener and the Council. Our dedicated and skilled staff, our registrants and employers, partners and others, building on our achievements. This is an exciting time for the organisation." Miss Allison starts her new role with the SSSC at its office in Dundee. So Fatha, what can we kind of expect from, excuse me, what can we expect with this appointment?
I would have to be honest and say I'm not entirely sure, because it's not really an area that I have much knowledge about. So I think all I can say is it's nice to hear about her experience, and I would just like to wish her well and see what happens next in terms of addressing the needs of our services, of our social services.
An independent study finds that Scotland's forestry sector contributes £1.1 billion a year to the economy. A new report has found that Scotland's forestry contributes £1.1 billion to the economy each year and supports more than 34,000 jobs. The independent study commissioned by the Scottish Forestry notes that the industry directly employs over 10,000 people, with a further 5,630 people, 5,630 working across the wood processing and forest activities. This represents a 30% increase in jobs since 2015. The findings underline the growing importance of Scotland's natural economy and demonstrates how forestry is supporting many businesses, rural economies and communities. The report was launched by Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes as she visited West Fraser Dalcross Mill at Moray near Inverness. West Fraser is a leading global manufacturer of wood-based panels. Scotland's forest, Miss Forbes said, "Scotland's forest and woodlands are a sustainable powerhouse. They support a growing number of jobs, many in rural areas, and make an increasingly important contribution to the Scottish economy. The Scottish Government is committing to expanding our forests and woodlands as ensure they continue to provide multiple benefits for Scotland. Scottish Forestry is working closely with the sector to maximise further woodlands creation with the resources available. Scotland is creating nearly 75% of all new woodlands in the UK, and last year saw the highest level of woodland creation in 34 years. Fatima, I'll bring you back in again for this story. So it's 1.1 billion is a huge number of money to contribute to our economy.
Absolutely, and I think it just goes to show the incredible contribution that Scotland's forestry makes to our economy. I mean, and it's particularly in the midst of economic challenges that we're facing and the amount of jobs it employs. So what I would like to see going forward is us maximising the opportunities from Scotland's forestry, because I'm very keen, as I've always said publicly and privately, that we must diversify our economy. We should not be over-reliant on one sector or one source. So I'd like to see going forward us having discussions about the opportunities in Scotland's forestry. I'd like to see investment that will be happening as well, because that is an incredible contribution to our economy, and it would certainly make a massive difference, continued investment, because look at the economic challenges we're facing as well. So let's see what happens from here in terms of realising opportunities and support for Scotland's forestry, for what the remarkable contributions it's making to our economy.
Thank you very much, Fatima, for joining us on tonight's show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this evening. Before I go, I just wanted to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland, we depend. Before I go, I just wanted to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. Our programme will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our focus must now move to securing the future of independent broadcasting for Scotland by growing our subscribers base and regular funding. Thank you to our guests. Once again to Fatima. Thank you, Fatima, again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Goodbye, and thank you for watching, and have a nice weekend.